Hello board game brothers and sisters, I'm Adam Singer and welcome to another episode where I'll be letting you know of all the board games launching on Kickstarter and GameFound over the next week. If you're new to the channel, we do this every week, but not every week is going to be as crazy as this video that you're watching right now, because we have a ton of games to go over this week. I think this might be a new record for the channel, and I've been doing this for like over 3 years, and I think we've got over 30 games to cover, so no idea how long this video is going to be, but it's probably going to be a long one, but I'll try to get through this as quickly as I can for your own sanity as well as my own. But before we jump into the games, I do always like to go over some news and announcements that I just found out over the past week. Luckily, we are pretty light on this, but we did get a announcement for a date for the DCeased Zombicide game, which is the next Zombicide game being offered by CMON. And this one's going to be focusing on the DC universe, very similar to what they did with the Marvel Zombicide game. And as far as I can tell, these two should be compatible, which is pretty exciting news because I wasn't sure if they were going to be allowed to do that, since each of these universes are owned by different companies. That's pretty much it regarding the actual games, but I did also want to mention that I will be trying to go to PAX Unplugged in December. Still figuring it out, still trying to fit it into the budget, and we'll see how that works, but I'll keep you updated if I do decide to go. And if I do end up going and you're attending as well, I am always happy to try and meet up or play some games. But there is another convention that was just announced, and this one I'm even more excited for because this is the Next Level Up Retreat. And this one's exciting for a few reasons, because it is hosted by Alex Radcliffe over at Boardgame.co, but he gets a bunch of help from a ton of different people from the community as well as the industry, many of which are designers or content creators that you might have seen on his channel before or on their own channels. But it is just a ton of fun just hanging out with friends and playing games, and that is the main focus of this event, which really makes it stand apart from a lot of other events that have a lot of booths up where they're going to be trying to sell you things. This one is very different, where it's just focused on playing games and hanging out and having fun. I'm not exactly sure how different this one's going to be from that previous retreat, but I'm sure it will start changing a little bit as more people get involved and as the retreat grows in size. But I know that this core concept of just having fun and playing games is really something that Alex really values as part of this retreat, and I know it's going to be something that he tries to maintain moving forward. If you are interested in this one, the website has been updated with all the new information, and it looks like you can sign up to get notified of any new updates as well. But this is definitely one that I recommend, and if I can only make it to one of these conventions, this is the one that I'm going to be going to. I will be talking about this one more in the future, and I should also get a coupon code that I can share with you that'll give you a bit of a discount on your badge. But if you're not familiar with Alex over at Boardgame.co, he has a channel which I'll be linking down in the description below if you want to check it out. But he provides all sorts of coverage for reviews, playthroughs, and general commentary on the industry. But him and I do work together to keep track of all these upcoming campaigns so that I can give you the best coverage for these games week to week. But then he also puts up a video at the start of each month giving you a quick rundown of all the heavy hitters for that month. If you like these weekly updates, you'll definitely want to check out his monthly ones as well, which will give you a bit of a head start on some of the games to come. But like I said, we do have a ton of games to cover this week, so we should probably get to that, so let's check them out. And the first campaign we have launches on October 23rd, and this one's called Justice, and it plays 3 to 5 players and probably takes about an hour to an hour and a half to play. But this is a competitive game where players are going to be acting as the council of law. It's going to be up to the players to go through different crimes, with each of the crimes having 3 different suspects, and then the players are going to be collectively deciding whether or not each suspect is innocent or guilty. Of course, this may not always reflect reality, and it's for this reason that this game is also a bit of a hidden identity game, because each player is going to be dealt an identity at the start of the game, and you're going to be keeping the secret throughout the entirety of the game, but it pretty much determines what you want those final outcomes to be at the end of each round, where the philanthropist might want everyone to be acquitted whether or not they're guilty, and then the commissar will want everyone to be convicted, and then the other players may want to result in convicting the appropriate suspects or doing the complete opposite. The main board gets set up every single round with a random crime being put at the top, and then 3 suspects who are going to be tried for that crime. Whether or not those suspects actually committed the crime or not is going to be randomly determined by shuffling up a card and putting it face down underneath each of those suspects, and of course that will be revealed at the end of the round. But what's really interesting about this game is that it is a trick-taking game. The different cards that players have in their hand are going to have different suits that all represent different types of evidence, but the trump suit is going to be determined by whichever crime card is currently in play, so that will be changing from round to round. And the way that players get the cards into their hand for each round is that after all of this is set up, from what I've said so far, players will then be either dealt a hand of cards, or you could choose to draft a hand of cards depending on how you want to play the game. Trick-taking in this game works similarly to the traditional method of trick-taking, but with a few added changes. Players will have tokens that they'll be able to spend to skip a turn, allowing them to see another round of cards played before they decide what they want to play, or they could also instead play a token to try and look under one of the suspects to see which ones are actually innocent or guilty. After all the players have passed, the winner is going to be determined by whoever played the highest card of the led suit, or by playing the highest trump card if they didn't have that suit. And then the winner is going to be able to take one of the cards that they just won and then slide it either to the left-hand side or the right-hand side of one of the suspects. This is going to determine how that suspect is tried, because at the end of the round, you're going to be adding up all the values on the left-hand side and all the values on the right-hand side, and then comparing the two, and whichever side is higher is going to be determining whether or not that suspect is found innocent or guilty. There is also some icon matching you can do as well to add additional values onto that total, but that's essentially how the game works. Within a round, players are going to be playing several tricks until one of the players completely runs out of cards, and then that's going to be triggering the end of the round. And then all the suspects are going to be resolved, and the card underneath them is going to be revealed, so you can see which ones were actually guilty or innocent. And then the outcome of that is going to determine whether or not you score victory points for that suspect, depending on your identity card that you got at the start of the game. But there is another layer to this game that makes it even more fun, because not only can you put cards to the left or right of each suspect when you're playing those tricks, but there's also a card that you can put either above or below the suspect, which is going to be adding certain icons to that card, which can increase the victory points you get if you do score for that particular suspect. The icons that you're going to get are also going to be determined by your identity card, so you'll want to check your identity card to see which icons score best for you. The game's played over several rounds, and the player with the most victory points at the end of the game wins the game, and if this one sounds interesting to you, you can check it out. I'll have it linked in the description below. And launching on October 24th, we have Secrets of the Lost Tome, the Epic Edition. This plays 1 to 6 players and takes about 60 to 240 minutes to play. And this is going to be a re-implementation of the original game, but this one's going to feature upgraded artwork and components, as well as some small changes to the rules and streamlining of the game. But if you're not familiar with this game, this is a scenario-based dungeon crawler that's set in the world of H.P. Lovecraft. Players are going to be playing through different scenarios, with each scenario being its own standalone experience. But this is a cooperative game where each player is going to be playing as their own asymmetrical character with their own set of stats, with each of the stats helping in different areas which you'll want to take advantage for different skill checks or battles. But each player will also start with some starting gear that can also grant you with different effects, and you will be able to find more gear throughout the game. But each player also has trackers for their health, audacity, and courage. You're going to be using your audacity to issue rerolls, whether it's for a skill check or for battling the various monsters, and then the courage is going to be used as experience points, which you'll be able to use to unlock abilities as you play the game. The main board is going to be made up of a bunch of different tiles, and each player is going to have 5 actions to choose from on their turn. But you're going to be using those actions to move around the board, discover different items, and fight against enemies. And anytime that you move into a location with an undiscovered tile, you're going to be adding a tile there and then resolving its effects, which could introduce random enemies or have different effects, or even be trap rooms that players will have to move through with their skills in order to avoid incurring damage. Combat in this game is resolved using dice rolling, but it's only used to determine how many successful hits you're able to land. The actual amount of damage you do per hit is going to be determined by your character's total strength, as well as any gear that they have equipped that will add on top of it. Players can also roll critical hits, which will ignore the enemy's armor. The game continues like this, with each of the players taking their actions and taking advantage of their own individual strengths. But then after all the players have had a turn, you're going to be drawing a tomb card, which is going to dictate how the tomb and the enemies react to the players. Obviously doing things that are going to harm and hurt you and get in your way. But if the players are able to survive all that and complete the objective of the scenario, then they win the game. And if you are interested in this one, I'll have it linked in the description below. And launching on the 24th, we have Mons And Mages. And this plays 1 to 4 players. It takes about 30 to 60 minutes to play. And this is a competitive game with players battling against each other, recruiting different monsters into their team, training those monsters, and potentially even evolving them, much like you would expect in the game of Pokemon. But this one plays very different than Pokemon. I think it has a lot of nuance in the design that makes this a very snappy engine builder with a lot of great decisions and opportunities for comboing. And it also includes a ton of cute creatures, and you can never go wrong with that. But as I said, this is a competitive game of taming monsters, and there's a whole bunch of different monsters that you can recruit onto your team with a wide variety of abilities and effects that can trigger at different points in the game. They might trigger as soon as you get them, they might trigger when you get other monsters, or they might trigger when you do various other actions throughout the game, or even if your opponent does certain actions. But in this game, the monsters are much more friendly than what you'd find in Pokemon, and they're not actually attacking each other. Instead, each player has a health crystal, and you're going to be using your creatures to attack your opponent's health crystal, trying to bring that single health value down to 0 first. And of course, each of these creatures are unique with their own set of stats that come into the game in various ways and affect the various abilities in all sorts of different ways. But you're going to have stats for the type of creature, the size, the strength, and even the friendliness. And of course, each character will also have a class. And this is kind of like the elemental type that you would find in Pokemon, and it's going to give you specific advantages or abilities for being a part of that class. But these creatures aren't the only way to tip the battle in your favor, because each player is going to be drawing 3 ability cards at the start of the game, and then you're going to be able to choose one of those to put into your tableau. On your turn, you're going to be gaining an income of resources, which you'll be using to recruit the various monsters which are out on display. You'll then have the option to perform one of 2 possible actions. You can either perform the meditation action, which allows you to put 1, 2, or 3 of that resource onto one of your meditation cards, which will double its value, but you don't get those back until a future turn. This is great if you want to prepare yourself for future rounds in the game, but it does lock off some of those resources, making them not accessible to you now. And it does, of course, come at the cost of not performing the other action, which is to spend the tokens to recruit a creature from the supply. Whenever you do that, you're going to be taking the associated creature from the supply, assuming you meet all the requirements to do so. And then you're going to be adding that creature to a row of cards in front of you, always putting that creature to the right-hand side unless it has any abilities or effects that allows you to change that. Any immediate effects of that creature will get activated, but then you also get to activate your team, and the way that this works is by moving the token located on one of your cards, 1 card over to the right. This is how you're going to be activating the individual creatures on your team, because even though you just added that creature and it might have had some immediate effects, you don't actually get to use its primary ability until this token moves onto that creature. Whenever a creature does get activated, it can also gain a mana token, and some creatures can actually spend these to perform some secondary abilities, or instead you can choose to leave it there because there is a certain limit of mana tokens that creatures can accumulate, and once that is maxed out, it's going to trigger unleashing one of their more powerful abilities. But one thing to note about the river of cards in front of you is you're actually going to be starting out with 3 different filler cards that don't have any effects when that token actually moves onto them. So you're going to be trying to get rid of these as quickly as possible. And a way to do this is by recruiting monsters into your row, because anytime you do that, you'll be able to remove one of the tokens on that card. And once all the tokens are removed from a card, then you'll be able to remove that from your row, essentially making your monsters trigger more often, because once the token reaches the end of the row, it does cycle back to the beginning. And another added bonus when you do this is that once you've got rid of all 3 of those filler cards, each of them will actually have a special ability on the back, and you'll be able to choose one to put into your tableau, making you even more powerful and just allowing you to build up your engine in another way. I really like what I'm seeing with this one. It's super easy to set up, teach, and play, and it offers a whole wide variety of different creatures, making every game feel very different than the last. And of course, with those different abilities and the initial monsters that you decide to recruit into your team, that's going to to be setting up your trajectory for the rest of the game, because each of the monsters will synergize in different ways, allowing you to explore and discover new strategies every time you play this game. If you think that sounds exciting as well, you can find a link to this campaign in the description below, and of course you can click that notify me button if you want to get notified once it launches. And you will also get a $3 discount if you do sign up on their website before it launches. So definitely take advantage of that if you do plan on backing this one. And the next campaign we have also launches on the 24th, and this one's called Ynaros Fallin. And this plays 1 to 4 players and takes about 45 to 60 minutes to play. And this one is a competitive area control game with a unique twist, because in this game, once you control the area, you actually take it into your possession permanently, with a new area flipping up with a different requirement. And in order to take those areas, you do have to fulfill the requirement that the area presents. This is also a campaign that I did cover in the past, and I went into all the detail on how this one plays, so I'll just go ahead and roll that previous footage for you now. And this one is an area control game, but this one is a little bit different than most area control games that I've seen, because although you are trying to control the board to get the best advantage, you're actually trying to fulfill different requirements of the different areas in order to take control of that land, and then add that land tile to your own personal player board. And when you take that land tile, that is yours permanently, but a new one is revealed for you or another player to try and conquer. The game uses a hex board with 5 different spaces generating resources to any of the players currently standing on those spaces. Then there's also 6 different land tiles, and the 2 land tiles in the middle will provide an action that are available to any of the players that are able to land on that tile. But instead of players being able to collect these red tiles, they actually decay with every use, being replaced once they've been fully decayed. Players will be collecting the different resources to generate crystals, which I will come back to in a second. And each player will also be starting the game with their own shadow die that they'll be starting at the side with the 4. Each player's turn is going to be broken down into 3 different phases, and the first phase is going to allow you to perform 2 actions out of a possible of 4 options, and you can perform the same action twice. And the first option is to just draw 5 cards from the common pile into your hand, and these cards are going to be coming in a few different colors, but the color that matches your player color is going to make those cards a little bit more valuable to you, which I will come back to in a second. The second option is to just play those cards from your hand, and you'll be able to discard those cards in order to increase the value of your shadow die for each card that you discard. And the shadow die is something you're going to be managing throughout the game, because it does have a few really important uses. And the first one is for movement, which is your third option. And in order to perform the movement action, you're going to be moving your miniature the number of pips as displayed on your shadow die, but then after you do that, you're going to be decreasing that die by 1 pip. And the fourth and final option is to choose one of your opponent's characters that are in line of sight of one of your characters out on the main board, and then you can discard a crystal to either do one of 2 things. You can either increase your shadow die by the amount that their shadow die is displaying, or instead you could use one of the powers from one of the lands that they have controlled. And as I said, when you do gain control of a land, you're going to be slotting it into your own personal player board, granting you access to that ability, or your opponents if they are using this action. And during the second phase of your turn, you'll be resolving any of the movement effects, like gaining any of the resources for the tiles that you moved into. But it's at this point on your turn that you can also spend pips on your shadow die, equal to the amount shown on a unrevealed location, in order to reveal that location. And of course, you'll only really want to be doing this if you think that you're going to be the one to get there first, and that you'll be able to fulfill the requirements of that location. So you'll probably want to reveal the ones that are closest to your characters. But if you did end your turn in a hex that also has an opponent player, this is going to trigger a battle. And it's in the battles where your cards really come into play, because any of the cards that have your color on it are going to be worth 2 battle points, while any of the other cards are going to be worth 1. And you can either spend that to inflict damage on your opponent or to heal your own wounds. But there are also 3 different colored battle dice, and at the start of the battle, each player can choose to discard one of their crystals in order to gain access to that battle die. And of course, you'll each be able to roll whichever ones you've claimed in order to get additional battle points to spend towards healing or damage. But another effect of this is whichever die that you claim will restrict your opponent from using battle cards of that color. Players will be gaining victory points depending on the outcome of the battle, and you could also cause one of your opponent's miniatures to be kicked off the board. That's everything that happens in the second phase, but then the third phase is an optional phase where the player can choose to convert any of their crystals into victory points. The game ends once one of 3 possible triggers are hit. Either a player has completely filled up their player board by claiming 6 different lands, or 3 of the magic land piles are fully depleted, or a single player has lost all of their crystals. Any of the players that have completely lost their crystals will instantly lose the game, but for any of the players that remain, the one with the highest victory points wins the game. Also launching on the 24th, we have Dice Treasure, and this plays 2 to 4 players. It takes about 30 to 45 minutes to play, and this is another game that I think looks like a ton of fun, offering a lot of very puzzly decisions to the players. And this one is a competitive game, but the way that it works is that each player is going to be dealt a hand of pattern cards at the start of the game, and then players are going to be taking turns drawing a pool of dice from a bag and then rolling those dice, and you're going to be trying to place as many of those dice on your various cards in order to fulfill those patterns. Each of the cards will have different spaces that might have requirements as to the value or the color of the die that can be placed on it, and players will be able to place as many dice as they can, and they can also reserve 2 dice for the future. But there is also the additional requirement that no 2 dice can be placed side by side if they share the same color or if they share the same value. So this is another requirement that you're going to be trying to fulfill as you fill out your various locations on your pattern cards. Any remaining dice that you weren't able to use or reserve for a future turn are going to be going to the center of the table, allowing for other players to also choose from those dice when it becomes their turn and they are placing dice on their cards. This already sounds like a lot of fun to me, but there's another really cool mechanism in this game, because every time you have another turn in this game, you're actually going to be drawing 1 less die from the bag, making your options smaller and smaller as the game goes on. And once players get down to only drawing 2 dice from the bag, they're actually going to be putting all their incomplete cards into the center of the table, creating an open market where any player can try to complete any of those cards. Players are going to be gaining victory points for each of the cards that they're able to complete, equal to the amount of coins that are depicted on that card. Each card also has an icon on it, and whichever player finishes a card with that icon first is going to be gaining a token that is going to be worth 2 victory points at the end of the game. The round ends once players can draw no more dice from the bag, and then you're going to be wiping any incomplete cards from the table along with any dice, putting them back in the bag, and then starting the round over again until one player reaches the amount of points to win the game, and then that player wins. And if you are interested in this one, you can find a link to it in the description below. Also launching on the 24th, we have DreamEscape, and this is a solo game that takes about 30 to 120 minutes to play. And this one is a choose-your-own-adventure style game that takes place in a Cthulhu mythos dream world, where players are going to have to overcome that dream in order to wake up. There are a whole bunch of different characters in this game with their own unique set of stats and abilities, and you'll be choosing one at the start of the game and then sliding them into this player board, which you're going to be using to track their various conditions and their different stats and trackers. And it's also going to be providing different areas for you to put in tokens depending on what happens as you play through the adventure. Abilities are going to help you bend the rules of the game in various ways, while your stats are going to be helping you with particular skill checks. You're also going to be starting with 3 random items at the start of the game, which are going to be giving you certain effects or one-time use abilities, and then you're also going to be starting with 3 runes to help with your various skill checks. The game provides a whole bunch of different decks, with some of them offering you clues, items, or even presenting different threats or conditions, with each of those decks also potentially having locked cards that you'll need to meet the requirements of before they make their way onto the table. But like I said, this is a choose-your-own-adventure game that takes place in a dream world, and I think the theme on this one really props up this game to do the choose-your-own-adventure genre right, because there is a few aspects of this game that I am really impressed with one of those being that there are a bunch of different stories in this game, but each time you play it, you are not limited to exploring just one of these stories. Each story is not its own standalone scenario. Instead, you can mix these together, and since you're in a dream world, you can actually jump from story to story, changing up your adventure and the different locations that you might explore. But something else that I think is really cool, and this is my favorite aspect of this game, is that in this choose your own adventure, if you go down a path that turned out to be not what you hoped it to be, or maybe you failed a skill check and you weren't able to go the way that you wanted to, well, the thing with this game is that any time that a card is resolved, it's actually going to be going into your memory bank, and there are actually ways that you can bring cards out of the memory bank in order to reset yourself back to that time, and then re-challenge that card to get a different outcome. Honestly, I wish something like this was in every choose your own adventure game, because whenever I play one of these, I find myself just resetting and cheating the game a little bit just to see the storyline the way that I want to see it go, or especially when the impact of your decisions isn't really presented to you well enough before you make the decision. It can feel kind of random to just choose something and go in that direction, where in this game, even if some of the cards have that problem, it still gives you the opportunity to go back and try something different. So I really love this, and I want to see this in more choose your own adventure games. But like I said, you're going to be moving through the adventure, and some of those turning points are going to be determined by different skill checks. And in this game, skill checks are not done with dice, but instead done with tokens. These work very similarly, where you're going to be taking some of these tokens and then rolling them, with each side of the token having a different result. But you're essentially trying to piece them together to get as many stars as possible. Some of these tokens are better than others, and you can acquire more throughout the game, and the amount that you do get to roll for a given skill check does depend on your stats for the particular skill that's being challenged. But of course, this wouldn't be complete without a little bit of push your luck, so some of these tiles can have very good outcomes on them, like this one that just grants you a star if it lands on the appropriate side, but some of these could also have these Cthulhu tokens, and anytime that those get flipped, well, you're going to have some negative effects. That icon's going to cause you to put one of these Cthulhu tokens onto the various spaces on your board, essentially locking off that skill or ability until you're able to get that token removed. Also, if you get too many of these, you can permanently lose your abilities, and also if you get too many, you can just straight up lose the game. Some of the story cards also have a red icon located in the top left corner of the card, and anytime that you encounter one of these cards, you're going to be moving the event token up the event track, probably causing some negative effects, which is going to be putting a fire under you to try and win the game quickly before too many bad things start happening to you. Luckily, you will also be gaining experience points as you play the game, and that's going to be moving your experience cube up the XP track. And you can spend this at any time to use any of the abilities that that token has made it to, but that will reset the track, forcing you to restart from the beginning anytime that you want to activate one of those special actions. If you're able to survive those story decks long enough to find the gates you need to escape the dream world, then you win the game, but if you lose your health or go insane or get too many of those red tokens put on your board, then you lose the game and you stay trapped in that dream forever, in a horrible HP Lovecraft universe with a ton of different monsters, but luckily you are probably also insane at this point, so maybe it's not all that bad. Links in the description below. Also launching on October 24th, we have the next campaign coming from Game Toppers, and this is going to be introducing a whole bunch of new prints for their playmats, which I'll go into in a second here, but it's also introducing a brand new table called the Young Sherlock. And this is a smaller size table that can also be equipped with smaller legs that makes it very suitable as a coffee table, but then also works really well if you have smaller kids and you're looking for a table that is more suited to their height. This is also compatible with all their accessories like their cup holders and component trays that you might have seen on their other tables. And before I get too far ahead of myself, I do want to mention that they are running a giveaway for this table. So if you want to go ahead and enter into that giveaway, all you have to do is scan the QR code, which I have on the screen right now. So you can go ahead and scan that, or pause it if you need a second. But just scan that, go to the link, scroll down a bunch until you see enter the competition, and then you can click that, and if you share their post on Facebook or Twitter or any of your social media, that's going to be getting you some entries into the giveaway. But if you're not familiar with Game Toppers, they provide a wide array of products to enhance your board game experience, ranging from tables to bags to all sorts of different accessories, and all of them are of very good quality. Well, except for I have seen more impressive board game bags, but the funny thing about these bags are these are actually the ones that I prefer by a mile compared to those more luxurious bags that cost a ton of money, because these ones are way more affordable and they get the job done just as well. They have really nice zipper on them, and they even compact down when you're not using them, which makes them really easy to store. And I don't own any of these bags myself, but when I moved a couple years back, I did borrow a whole bunch of different bags from a friend of mine when I was moving all my board games to my new place, and these are the ones that I preferred by far. The other ones look really nice, and they are really thick material and all that, but they are super expensive, and honestly, this is more than enough that you need for any game night. If you do already own one of those big expensive bags, they definitely are nice and they probably will last you a lifetime, so no regrets there. But if you don't own one already, I think these ones are more than enough. And like I said, I prefer them just because they're compact and easy to store. Once I take the games out of them, I don't have to worry about trying to stuff them into some corner somewhere. But now let's get to the playmats. And before I get too far ahead of myself and saying too many positive things about the work that this company does, I do want to mention that they did send me 2 playmats, so take that as you will. They're not paying me to do any of this, and I didn't require them to send me any of these mats. They just did it out of the goodness of their heart, but I'm really glad that they did because now I can see them for myself and give you a little bit more information on what I think. And just regarding game mats in general, my opinion is that if you don't own one already and you do play games frequently enough, I do think it is a worthy investment. First of all the mats that I've seen do have a matte finish, so you're not going to be getting all those annoying reflections and glare off the top of your table anymore, and it does create a nice contrast to whatever game that you're playing. And that's probably the most minor thing that a game mat adds, but I do think it's worth mentioning because I haven't really heard anyone mention that before. But it's also going to make components easier to pick up off the table, especially cards. If you ever find yourself having to slide them to the edge in order to pick them up, all you have to do is press down on your mat and you'll be able to pick up that card no problem. And of course with any other components as well. But probably one of the best benefits is that it does act as a silencer for any of your dice rolls, and it's also going to protect your table from any of that sliding around of cards and boards, but as well as the dice rolling, because if you do have a nice table, it is worth protecting. And I know a lot of us are probably playing on our kitchen tables or dining room tables, and it's nice not to scuff that up and cause any damage because obviously a table is a big investment. And of course there's also the aesthetics aspect, and you can get playmats in all sorts of different designs and patterns, ranging from very colorful and vibrant with different scenery on them, all the way down to a completely plain and generic single color. Of course, Game Toppers offers you all of these selections in all of your standard sizes on their website, but then also they're going to be introducing a whole bunch of new designs in this campaign as well, which I will go through in just 1 second here. But I think this is an area that really sets Game Toppers apart because you can go on Amazon and buy yourself a playmat, and I did check, and at least in Canada, it's not easy to find game mats of this size that are going to fit perfectly into your table. But then also, you're not really saving much more money by going that route, and you're definitely not going to be getting as much quality. And I think that's really where Game Toppers stands out here, because as soon as I put this mat out on my table, I had a reaction to it, because even though this does have a matte finish like every playmat that I've ever seen, it actually did look kind of shiny to me just because the colors were so vibrant on it, and I wasn't quite sure if it was matte or not. But now that I have all the lights down on it, I can see very clearly it's not reflecting or anything like that. But they definitely did not skimp on the printing here, because the colors really pop and it really looks amazing. And if you're wondering why my table has so much more color than usual, that is the reason. Not only that, but the artwork that they are providing, you're not going to be able to find anywhere else, because they are working directly with various artists as well as artists from the board game community in order to put together all these different designs. And another thing that I noticed that is a bit smaller of a feature, but these do come with their own carrying bag, which makes it really nice to transport. And that carrying bag comes with a very handy little window, so that if you do have multiple game mats, you don't have to be digging through them to find the one that you're looking for. You can just look at the little window to see which pattern you are grabbing. And to me, the design on the game mats generally falls into 2 different types of categories. There's the more generic ones that generally have a particular theme that really makes it work well for pairing with board games of that same theme. Like I said, Game Toppers has a whole bunch of these already on their website, but these are the new ones that they're going to be adding to the campaign. There's the Desert Dunes, Battleground, Water, Starfield, Mars, and the Lost Worlds, which is a jungle style with a bit of some ruins mixed in. But this one is kind of bordering on the edge of my 2 definitions here, because these other ones are going to look great no matter what direction you're sitting at the table. I think this will work well for that as well, because it does have more of a bird's eye view, but then it is bridging into those more cinematic designs that do have more of a perspective, but just look like really nice pieces of art. And there's this horror one, as well as this ancient Egypt and Old West theme, which do also have that bird's eye view look as well. And then finally, the nature design. And the nice folks over at Game Toppers let me select 2 of these mats, and if you're interested in the 2 that I would choose out of these, I can just let you know the ones that I selected, because the first one was the water theme, because this just works for so many games out there. Even just here in my collection, we have Isle of Cats, Darwin's Journey, Dinosaur Island, Seventh Continent, Wreck Raiders, Aqua Garden, Vindication, and even Rising Sun and Blood Rage are on islands. So the water theme just works so well with so many different games out there. I think if you want the most flexibility, this is probably one to go for, aside from getting just a generic color. Although a space theme was also a tough choice as well. But since it was going into my table, I thought it'd be kind of cool when the top comes off that we have water down below. And my second choice was the one that you see on the table now, and I just couldn't pick any other one because this one just spoke to me. I just loved the artwork way too much. It looks amazing in this picture, and it looks even better on the actual mat. Maybe it's the Canadian side of me, but this one just has so much interesting stuff going on it with all the different animals, and it just looks fantastic. And I know this is just going to blow people's minds when they come over to play games like Everdell or any game that has an animal or forest theme, which is also a common theme in board games. And like I said, you can get these mats in all sorts of different sizes, and they have a size for each one of their different styles of table. And from what I can tell, these do fall into most of those standard sizes that your table might be, even if you don't have one of theirs. But if you do have a table that it doesn't quite fit exactly, and you are particularly adventurous or crazy, probably crazy, and they probably wouldn't have sent me this mat if they knew this in advance, but you can go ahead and cut off one side to get it fit just right. You will be losing a bit of the stitching, so like I said, you do need to be a little crazy. But if you do own their tables, they also have this unique perk where they're going to be creating these brand new mats that do fit into the arm rails on the table, which is a really cool feature. I haven't seen this before, so really cool of them to come up with something unique with board game mats and tables in mind. And also the campaign will be offering you an easy way to transport or hang up your mats if you do get a few of them, because there's going to be this carrying caddy that you can put your mats into, and then you can just fold it up and carry it along with you or hang it up on the wall. I thought I was going to be covering this one quickly, but there's quite a bit more to cover than I expected, but hopefully that was helpful. And if you are interested in this campaign, you can find a link to it in the description below. And the next campaign we have is also launching on the 24th, and this one's called the 13th Street Crew. And this plays 3 to 7 players and takes about 30 to 60 minutes to play. And this is a hidden identity game about completing jobs and trying to avoid the police. Mostly because each player is going to be dealt a hidden identity at the start of the game, and that's going to tell you whether or not you are loyal to the crew, or if you want to try and get them caught by the police, or to try and take all the money for yourself. There is also the chance that everyone is loyal, so you don't always know what exactly you're going to end up with from game to game. But essentially the way that this game works is that there's going to be a whole bunch of different jobs out on the table, and players are going to be trying to complete these jobs in order to gain money. But at the start of your turn, you're going to be drawing a resource card into your hand, and these resource cards are going to have icons on them, which you're going to be using to try and complete these jobs, because each job is going to have a number of different icons, and you're going to be spending those resource cards in order to fulfill the requirements of this job, which will give you the opportunity to complete it, because there is more to it. But luckily, if you don't have enough icons, a lot of these jobs do allow you to invite other players as part of your crew, and any players that accept are able to contribute any of their resource cards towards completing that job. And whether or not you are loyal, if you have those cards, then you must contribute them. But the active player does have a few options on their turn, and they can choose not to complete a job. And if that's the case, then all the players are just going to be drawing one resource card into their hand, and it's going to be moving on to the next player. But if the player does want to complete a job, there's actually 3 different jobs that you can choose to complete. There is the solo jobs, which you'll just be trying to attempt on your own. And then there are the small jobs, which require at least 2 players to complete. And then there are the big jobs, which require at least 3. Each of the jobs does have a reward that will be given to the active player, as well as any of the crew that was able to complete it, assuming that they are able to successfully complete that job. But if they aren't able to meet the requirements of those icons, then that job just fails, nothing happens, and it just moves on to the next player. But if they are able to meet those icon requirements, the job is not quite a success yet because, of course, committing all these jobs isn't exactly legal and the police might show up to thwart your efforts. Each of the players starts the game with an all clear card as well as a police presence card, and once a job is successfully completed, all the players that were involved in that job are then going to be contributing one of those cards into a pile, and then you're also going to be drawing one randomly from a deck and throwing it in that pile as well. If any one of those cards shows up as a police presence card, then the job is failed, and that police presence card remains in play for the rest of the game, and if 5 of those show up in the game and one player is playing as the informant, then they will win the game. Otherwise, it's the players that reach $15,000 that win the game, and multiple players can win the game at once because you can make negotiations with the other players in order to bring them on jobs so that you time it appropriately so you all hit that 15K mark at the same time. Unless you're the informant, because if any other player wins with you, then you lose the game. So you're going to want to try and get to that 15K mark on your own, or get 5 of those police cards out on the table. Another great looking game here, and if this one sounds interesting to you, you can find a link to the campaign in the description below. Also launching on the 24th, we have Nocturne, and this plays 1 to 4 players and takes about 30 to 45 minutes to play. And this is another game that I just think looks fantastic, and it also features artwork by Beth Sobel, who always does a fantastic job. But this is a bidding abstract strategy set collection game where players are each going to be starting the game with a bunch of different tokens of varying values, and you're going to be using these to put out on a grid of tiles in order to try and gain those tiles to create different sets. Each of the tiles will score in various ways depending on the different sets of those tiles that you get, but there'll also be a wild tile that gets you a bit of flexibility but is also very desirable, and then there are other tiles that can actually give you special actions, like a tile that if you gain it, you'll be able to draw objective cards, which will give you other opportunities to score and create different types of sets. And then there's also another tile that gives you negative points but also allows you to draw several tiles from the pile and then choose one to add into your supply. The game plays over just 2 rounds, and at the start of each round you're going to have a full grid of tiles out on the table, and then players are just going to be taking turns choosing one of their bid tokens and putting it out on one of those tiles. But there are some placement rules because you always have to place a bid token that is higher than the one that was previously placed, and you also have to put it on a tile that is adjacent to where the previous one was placed. Or if you don't want to put one of your tokens out, you can always choose to pass, but then once all the players pass, only the player that put the last token out on the board is going to be earning their tile. And a cool thing here is that when they take that tile, they actually leave their token out on the board, so they won't be able to use it for the rest of that round, and you're going to be flipping it to the other side to indicate that that spot was taken. That player also gets the privilege of starting the next turn, which is actually quite a big deal, and I'll come back to that in a second. But all the other players have the option to either take their tokens back into their supply or to put one of them up on this track on the separate board. And at the end of the round, whichever player has the highest bid tokens out here is going to have their first choice of the tiles out on this board. But as you're playing this game and more tiles are removed from the grid, you're going to end up in certain situations where it's not possible for another player to put a token adjacent to you because there's no open spots left. And in that case, you just immediately gain that tile. And like I said, you get to start the next turn, so if you set it up just right so that there's other tiles that are completely blocked off, if you were to put your starting token directly on a single tile, then you will just immediately win that tile. So this little detail introduces a whole bunch of strategy into the game because not only are you trying to get the tiles that you want to try and complete your sets, but you're also trying to take the tiles from the particular locations that are best going to set you up for the following rounds for hopefully some easy pickings. And I think I'm going to have to do it. This one's also going to have to be my pick of the week. I know this one's a bit of a lighter game, but it's just doing so many things right in a set collection game, which is a genre that I don't normally like for a lot of reasons that this game avoids. But we also have 30 games to cover this week, and there are going to be some other great contenders for pick of the week. And because I have the memory of the goldfish, I can't process that all at once, so there might be another game that I cover that might also be my pick of the week, so just prepare for more of this as this video continues. For First of all, I love the amount of affordance that this game offers the players because you do get to see all the tiles that are available at the start of each round, which means you do get to plan for the tiles that you want to get, and you do get to see the other tiles that players are taking, which allows you to more strategically select the sets that you want to go for. And that might not sound like such a big deal, but this is a huge issue that I have with so many set collection games because a lot of set collection games just don't give you a lot of information. This means that you could just inadvertently pick something that other players are going for or not going for, which just makes it feel very random, and like a lot of it just isn't in my control. Not only that, but this one also has those wild tokens that does give more flexibility to your set collection, but then obviously all the other players are going to want that as well, so it does make it very valuable, and I think the strategic element here with the way that you're gathering those tiles creates a lot of opportunity to try and force the other players to let you get that tile. And that concept itself is just super rewarding, so I love that this game rewards you so much for being strategic with the way that you take your tiles, and it's not only about getting specific tiles for your sets, it's also about which tiles you take in the grid. The objective cards are also a nice touch because it gives you even more flexibility and allows you to roll with the punches if you're not exactly getting the sets that you're trying to go for. And yes, there are global objective cards as well. And I wish I saw these images before I started filming this video because these ones are much better at showcasing the game, but here they are, and if you are interested in this campaign like I am, you can check it out. I do have it linked in the description below, and of course you can click to get notified. And it's only 29 bucks. Spoiler alert, but I am probably going to be backing this one. Launching on October 24th, we have Mayan Curse, and this plays 1 to 6 players and takes about 30 to 60 minutes to play. And this is another fantastic looking game, especially if you like treasure hunting in cursed Mayan temples. Because in this game, each player is going to be playing as a treasure hunter, trying to get into the temple and acquire as many relics as possible to score victory points, but try to get out as quickly as possible as well, because there's always a chance you could be locked in there forever. The way this game works is that all the players' adventures are going to be starting at the entrance of the board, and you might notice that some areas of this board have a bunch of different icons on them, while other areas are completely empty. This just means that any of the empty spaces allow players to just move freely through them, so if you are on that region of the board, it just means that on your next movement you can move into any of the spaces that are adjacent to that area. This is where the really interesting aspect of this game comes into play, because on a player's turn they're going to be drawing 3 tiles from a bag, with each of those tiles having a particular icon on them. Spending that tile is going to allow you to move through any amount of adjacent icons that match the icon on that tile. But you might be asking, how is that possible when almost none of these adjacent spaces have the same icon? Well, the answer to that is that each of these rows can actually be slid side to side, and on a player's turn they have up to 3 slides that they can make use of. You're going to be using that to try and match up adjacent icons so that you can spend that token matching that icon to move through as many spaces as possible. Of course, you're also trying to pick up those various tokens scattered on the board for victory points, so this is another layer on the puzzle that you're going to have to balance with the tokens that you're drawing from that bag. But of course, the most valuable treasure is going to be found on the top of this pyramid, and moving up that pyramid works exactly the same. You'll be able to rotate it by spending one of your slides, and then you'll be able to match the icons on the board with one of your tokens in order to move through those icons. Any player that does make it to the top of the pyramid at some point is going to be earning 15 victory points towards their final score. But of course, all of this is for naught if you're not able to escape. And like the title of the game says, this is a cursed temple. And the way that this curse comes into play is that some of these tokens that players are going to be collecting are actually going to be associated with certain boulders that are going to be rolling and blocking off areas of the board. There's 3 of these boulders, and they're represented by these blocks out on the board, with each side having a different icon, and when you take that token into your possession for its victory points, it's going to trigger one of these boulders to roll, and it's going to be rolling to the nearest location matching the icon that is currently at the top of that boulder. It's always going to be rolling towards the entrance of the temple, and it's just going to be moving to the closest space with that icon. But of course, as it's rolling to that location and when it comes to a stop, this could potentially mean a different icon is now shown at the top. This is going to determine where it moves for its next movement, and it's going to keep doing that until it reaches the locations at the entrance. There's 3 boulders and there's 3 spaces at the entrance, and once all the boulders have blocked off that entrance completely, any of the players still left behind have lost their opportunity to win the game no matter how much relics and victory points they have collected. Luckily, there is one more trick that players have up their sleeve because each player is going to be starting with a backpack card that has 4 different abilities on it. You can only use this once per game and you can only choose one ability, and when you do that, you're going to be flipping it over to the other side, indicating that you have spent that action. Of course, if you play well enough, you might not have to dip into your backpack, and if you're able to avoid doing that, that's going to be scoring you 2 additional victory points at the end of the game. And once all the players have left the temple, or once all the rocks have blocked off the entrance, any of the players that were able to make their escape are going to be comparing their victory points, and the player with the most victory points wins the game. And if you are interested in this one, you can check it out in the description below, and of course, click to get notified. Also launching on the 24th, we have a new expansion for the game Keep the Heroes out, and this one is called Boss Battles. And this is a expansion that's going to be adding more scenarios, monsters, and bosses with their own unique decks into the game. It's also going to be allowing for a configurable difficulty, but if you haven't played Keep the Heroes out, or if you're not familiar with it, I did offer previous coverage for this when it originally launched, and I'll just go ahead and roll that previous footage for you now. And this is a cooperative deck building tower defense game where players are going to be playing as the monsters, trying to protect their dungeon and treasures from the invading heroes. You'll start the game by choosing a scenario and difficulty, and then you'll be able to choose the monsters that you want to play as. You can play as the skeletons, the imps, the ratkin, or even the dragons, and a few others as well. Each round, players are going to be drawing 5 cards from their deck in order to perform different actions like moving, performing different tile-specific actions depending on their location, as well as attacking the heroes. After each player has had a turn, you're going to be drawing cards from the hero deck to determine which heroes are going to get spawned into the different locations of the dungeon. And each hero has some special abilities like ranged attacks, destroying resources, disarming traps, or breaking prisoners that you might have captured in your dungeon previously. Any heroes left over from previous rounds will get reactivated, and the whole goal of the game is to protect your main treasure. And if you're able to do that while going through 3 hero decks, then you win the game. But if you ever lose your main treasure at any point, the game ends immediately and all players lose. Definitely a fun little game here with some really nice artwork and really cute meeples, and if this one interests you, definitely click that notify button because there is a 72-hour early bird that's going to get you painted meeples as well as some other nice goodies. Also launching on the 24th, we have Critter Kitchen. This plays 2 to 5 players and takes about 55 to 70 minutes to play, and this one is also our Discord pick of the week. And I'm not surprised because this is coming from the same team that brought you the game Flamecraft that got a lot of positivity in the community, and this one does share a similar theme, but it does play quite a bit differently. Because in this game, players are going to be managing their kitchen and preparing food for the various days of a festival where you're going to be trying to complete different objectives in order to try and score the most victory points. But on the final day of the festival, you're also going to have a special guest. And this is going to be a food critic that's going to want to weigh in their opinion on your food. There's a bunch of different critics offered in the game, but you're only going to be using one, but they all play a little bit differently, creating some different opportunities for you to score victory points. But each player's kitchen is going to consist of a mouse, a lizard, and a boar, and you're going to be using those workers to go out and gather the ingredients that you need to try and fulfill your various objectives. The mouse is the fastest but can only carry 1 item, whereas the boar is the slowest but can carry up to 3 items. The lizard is in the middle, not the slowest, not the fastest, but also can only carry 2 items. The main board is going to have a whole bunch of different locations that the player's workers can visit, with each of those locations offering 3 different ingredients. Players are going to also have a hand of cards that will feature each of these locations, and each round players are going to be simultaneously assigning those cards face down to one of their workers on their player board. Players are going to simultaneously reveal, and then you're going to be putting those meeples out on the board according to which ones are the fastest. So the mice are going to be going out first, taking up the first slot of whichever location each player associated with their mouse, followed by the lizard, and then of course followed by the boar. This means that if a player's mouse and another player's boar got sent to the same location, the mouse is going to get first choice of one of those ingredients because that's all it can carry, but then the boar is going to be able to take the remaining 2. It could carry 3, but since the mouse took one of them, it's only going to be able to take the remaining 2. In case of a tie, there is a tiebreaker track that will be changing throughout the game, and there are some other locations that offer you other opportunities and ways to gather ingredients that work a little bit different than the traditional location. This is a game that plays over several days, with each day revealing different objective cards for players to complete as part of the overall festival. Players will be gaining points for the ingredients that they contribute towards those objectives, and this is going to be repeating over those few days until you get to that final day. This is where players will be able to gain victory points by impressing that final critic, and the way that you do that is that the critic will accept one ingredient of each type from any of the ingredients that you have at this point in the game, and then you're going to be earning the victory points associated with that ingredient. There is a few things to consider though, because each ingredient is going to have a shelf life, and if you hang on to it too long, you're not going to be able to use it to fulfill any of these objectives. And there is also the fact that each of these critics is going to have secret tastes and preferences that can earn you additional victory points, and these are going to be hidden on face down cards that are next to that critic. And if you are able to fulfill any of those, you'll get bonus victory points at the end of the game, and there are ways to peek at those before the end of the game, because some of the tokens out on the board aren't ingredient tokens but instead are rumor tokens. And if you send out your cooks and bring back one of those rumor tokens, then you'll be able to spend it to look at one of those cards, which of course is going to put you in a much better situation to prepare for them, and a much better situation to earn those bonus victory points. That's pretty much how the game plays, with players collecting those ingredients to try and fulfill the various objectives that the festival has to offer from day to day, while saving their most valuable ones for that final critic to try and maximize their victory points. If this one sounds interesting to you, I will have it linked in the description below, and you can click to get notified. And also launching on the 24th, we have the next campaign being offered by Allplay or Board Game Tables, and this one is actually going to be offering you 3 different games, and this one is also our Discord pick of the week, because if I'm allowed to have 2 picks of the week, I guess the Discord is too, because this one did tie in first place with Critter Kitchen. But the big heavy hitter in this campaign is definitely Through the Desert, because this is a game by Reiner Knizia, and it plays 2 to 5 players and takes about 45 minutes to play. And this is one that has already established itself as an amazing game that a ton of people love, with a really nice rating on BGG. But this newer version, of course, is going to be offering you some upgraded components and brand new artwork. And they provided a whole bunch of details on the sizing and the look of the different components and the new boards. And this is also going to be including a new expansion called Through the Desert Bazaar, which is going to include 4 different modules that are going to offer some new ways to score, some pick up and deliver, and even crocodiles that players can manipulate to block off certain parts of the board. But like I said, these are modules, so players can choose to include or exclude any of these if you're not a fan of pick up and deliver, or if you're not a fan of crocodiles. To start the game, players are going to be taking turns placing out the palm tree tokens on the predetermined oasis spaces. But there's going to be more of these spaces than there are palm trees, so any that are left over are going to get a watering hole token. But then you're also going to be putting a watering hole token on any of the available watering hole spaces that are also predetermined out on the board. Once this is all set up, players are going to be taking turns putting one of their riders out onto the board. Each of the player's rider tokens will match that player's color, but then each of the camels will be of varying colors, with that color determining which caravan they can be a part of. But there are some placement rules when you're initially placing out these riders, and that's that they can't be placed directly next to an oasis, and they can't be placed directly next to another player's rider. Once all the riders have been placed out on the board, the game just continues over a series of turns, with players placing up to 2 of their camels out on the board on a given turn, with the goal to try and extend their caravans. You can only extend a caravan by placing a camel of the same color onto your pre-existing caravan, but there's a few different ways that you can try and score victory points in this game. The first is to try and connect your caravan so that it gets into a space with a watering hole token, and these can range from 1 to 3 victory points, and you're just going to be taking those victory points into your supply. The other way that you can gain victory points is by connecting to one of the palm trees, and that's going to score you 5 victory points at the end of the game. And then the final way to score victory points is to try and fully encapsulate a section of the board. And if you're able to do that, you're going to be picking up all the tokens within that area, but you're also going to be gaining a victory point for each hex that is in that area at the end of the game. There's very few restrictions on how you can extend your caravan. Basically, you can't move into any of these rocky areas that are blocked off, and you also can't connect to an opponent's caravan that is of the same color. Now, I don't have too many images showcasing the new artwork or components, so most of these images are of the original game, but the game continues like this, and then the player with the most victory points at the end of the game wins the game. And if you do want to check out the new artwork and the new components, you can find a link to the campaign in the description below. And the next game being offered in this campaign is called Switchbacks. This plays 2 to 4 players and takes just 15 minutes to play. And this one is also a tile placement game, but this one has a bit lighter rules than Through the Desert. And in this game, players are going to be placing tiles in order to scale up a mountain. On a turn, you're going to be putting one tile out on the table, adjacent to one of the tiles that have already been placed, and then you'll optionally have the choice to put one of your player tokens on it. The whole reason for this is that you're only going to be scoring for the tiles that have your player token, and the way that you score victory points is trying to create runs of tiles that have sequential values with the tiles next to them. The more of these that you have, the more victory points you'll gain, so you're going to be trying to put the tokens on the tiles that will have the most runs. Of course, you could also put tiles down just to get in the way of your opponents, giving you a few different strategies in this game. And the last game being offered in this campaign is called A Message from the Stars. This plays 2 to 8 players and takes about 45 minutes to play. And this one is more of a cooperative deduction game, but it can be also played on teams. But essentially, players are trying to work together to decipher transmissions that are coming from outer space. In this game, each player is going to be taking a different role, able to decipher the information in different ways or interact with that message by sending other messages back out into space. Players are going to be sending these messages and then receiving a message in return that's going to have a numeric value. Combining their abilities, players are going to be using their information and their deduction in order to determine the extraterrestrials' true motives. Unfortunately, I don't have a whole lot of information on how exactly this one plays, but if you do want to learn more, you can check out the campaign for any of these 3 games, and I'll have that linked in the description below. Also launch on the 24th, we have the Old King's Crown, and this plays 1 to 4 players and takes about 60 to 90 minutes to play. And this one is a competitive game where players are each going to be playing as unique factions, competing to be the next heir to the throne. Each player is going to have their own faction board with their different units, unique abilities, and a unique deck of action cards. There's also going to be some tactic abilities that each player is going to be starting with, and these can be modified throughout the game. But the way this game works is that there is going to be a main board made up of 6 different locations, with each row representing a different region with the 2 locations as part of that region. Players will each be drawing a hand of faction cards from their deck, and then they're going to be taking turns placing their leader tokens out on the board. The whole goal here is to put your leader on one of the locations that has an ability that you want to use, and then you're going to be using your strength in order to try and win that region. The way that players add strength to the different regions is by optionally adding any of their additional tokens that they have on their board, and by placing their cards in one of each of the regions. Players are going to be doing this in secret and then simultaneously revealing once all the players have placed their cards. Each of the regions are going to be resolved with players adding up their own individual strengths, adding any additional strength for matching different icons, or even from the card's abilities, or even if they do want to use some of those tactics tokens from their own player boards. A really cool mechanism about using those smaller tokens or your tactics abilities is that you're not going to be able to use them again until you pay a cost to get them back, and the cost is in the form of cards, which is going to reduce the amount of options you have on your turn. But for each player that wins one of the regions, they're going to be able to choose one of the location's abilities there. And if they choose the ability where they put their leader token, they're also going to be adding influence at that location, which is the way that you're going to be trying to win the game. But there is one more place where players can put their cards, and that's in this bottom row here. And the way that this works is exactly the same as the other regions, but instead of winning a location ability, you're going to be gaining one of these ability cards, and these can grant you all sorts of special effects. But each player that puts a card there is going to be able to get one, but whoever has the highest strength is going to have first dibs on any of those cards. I'm going to go ahead and say this one's my pick of the week. I think it has a lot of really interesting mechanisms going for it, and I really do think that the hand management is the coolest aspect of this game, and I think it does it really, really well, because another cool mechanism in this game is that anytime that you completely run out of your faction cards and you have to reshuffle your deck, your new hand size is going to be 1 less than it was before. This means that the cards that you have available to you are going to be less and less every single turn. And when you combine that with the fact that spending your tokens out on the board board, costs you cards to get them back, as well as your tactics tokens. This is going to create a really crunchy decision process where you're going to have to decide what you want to do to optimize the amount of influence that you can get. I really love tough decisions like this, and I think this game is going to be offering a lot of them. So if this does look like one that you're interested in as well, you can check it out, and I'll have links to the campaign in the description below. Also launching on the 24th, we have City of Myrkesh, and this plays 2 to 5 players. It takes about 60 to 90 minutes to play. And this is a competitive deck builder where you're going to have a main board where you're going to be navigating to try and gather new cards, inflict damage, and try to score victory points. The way that this game works is that each player is going to be building up their deck of cards, and on your turn you're going to be drawing a hand of these, and then you're going to be playing those to gain the resources that are depicted on that card. There's 3 different resources in this game, one that allows you to move your pawn to the different locations on the board, and then there's gold that allows you to buy cards, but in order to do that you need to have your pawn next to the card that you want to buy. And then also you have your strength, which you'll be able to use to attack the monster in the center of the board. And this is one of the main ways that you gain victory points, because every time you deal damage to that monster, you're going to be taking one of its damage tokens, which counts as victory points at the end of the game. But the monster is not going to sit idly by as you attack, and it will change its position to face towards you. And it will also have a retaliation depending on the amount of damage that you did. Depending on the position of the monster relative to you, that can change some of the effects of the cards, and it also requires you to spend 1 additional speed if you want to buy a card when the monster is facing your direction. Each of the cards also have different icons that you can chain together to allow for additional effects if you play other cards of a certain type in the same turn, and you can also choose to just disregard all the effects of a card in order to spend it as 1 movement. The end of the game is triggered once all of the monster's health is depleted, and then players are going to be gaining victory points for the amount of damage that they've done, as well as adding any victory points from the cards that they bought, and the player with the most victory points at the end of the game wins the game. Also launching on the 24th, we have Takenoko the Big Box, and I'll let you know what's going to be included in that after I explain how this game plays, but this is a game that plays 2 to 4 players. It takes about 45 minutes to play. And this is a competitive game where players are all going to be sharing a garden where there's going to be a farmer as well as a hungry panda. Players are going to be using their actions to manipulate both the panda and the farmer, with the panda going around and eating bamboo, and the farmer trying to go around and grow that bamboo. This creates a really interesting dynamic because players will be able to score victory points from both those competing forces. Depending on what you cause the panda to eat, that can allow you to gain victory points and try to score sets, and also try to complete certain objectives. But then also you'll have other objective cards that might require you to try and create a certain state out on the board. But the way this game works is that on a player's turn, they'll be able to take 2 different actions, and this is all outlined on your own player board with these 2 action tokens. One of the actions allows you to draw 3 tiles and place 1 out onto the board in order to extend the garden, while another one might allow you to move the farmer in order to grow any bamboo in an adjacent tile. Players will also be able to use an action to place these irrigation tokens that allow the bamboo to grow, because no bamboo will grow on a tile unless it is irrigated. Players will also be able to use an action to move a panda into an adjacent location, eating a bamboo stalk in that location when it enters. And then there's also an action that allows you to draw an objective card. In addition to this, players will also be able to roll a die on their turn that gives them a bonus to their actions, which can allow them to do all sorts of different things, like grow bamboo on any of the tiles, move the panda to an adjacent tile, perform a 3rd action, or even perform the same action twice, or even gain an upgrade token which you can place on any of the tiles to have different effects, like prevent the panda from ever going into that tile, or allow that tile to generate water. But the game essentially continues like this, and then the player with the most victory points at the end of the game wins the game. This new campaign is going to be offering you a wooden big box solution that will fit the core game and the Chibi's expansion, and it also provides a condensed rulebook that's going to be combining all the rules into that single book. It's also going to be giving you a dice tray as an added bonus, and if you do want to check this one out or see what else the campaign has to offer, I will have a link to it in the description below. Also launching on the 24th, we have U-Boot the board game, and this plays 1 to 4 players and takes about 30 to 120 minutes to play. And this one is a really impressive and unique game, but it's also not for everyone because this one is on the more heavier side of games. But in this game, players are all going to be playing as different roles as they operate a German submarine, tasked with sinking ships in order to win the game. If you're a fan of immersive games, I think you'll definitely want to check this one out because this one offers an experience that I think very few games are able to achieve, and this one is very true to form. Because in this game, each player is going to be taking on their different roles, working together and taking on their different responsibilities, with each of those responsibilities creating a very different experience depending on your specialty in the game. This is an app-driven game, and depending on your role, you might be using the app or using a subset of workers and different tools in order to operate that submarine. This could mean that you're using the periscope, identifying enemy ships, tending to the crew, charting and navigating your course, setting your depth and speed, making repairs, and loading and launching torpedoes. The table presence definitely adds to the immersion with a 3D representation of the submarine, and with every player operating in their own individual roles, it's truly a spectacle when you enter all that into the app and you land a hit on your target ship. The special edition of the game is going to be coming with a massive 90 centimeter plastic miniature that is full of detail and definitely something that you'll want to add if you are a fan of this game. So if you do want to check it out, I will have the links to the campaign in the description below. And also launching on the 24th, we have the first set for Worldspanner Factions, which plays 2 to 8 players and takes about 150 to 240 minutes to play. And this one is a tactical arena combat game of adventure and resource management. In this game, players are going to be mixing characters and themes from all time and universes. And this one is also the successor to the game Duel of Ages, which has a really nice rating of a 7.3 on BoardGameGeek. But if you're not familiar with this game, it can be played competitively or as a team, and this version is also going to be offering a cooperative campaign that plays over 5 acts, where players are going to be building and controlling a team of athletes competing in arena combat in the distant future. The storyline is going to offer branching paths depending on the decisions, successes, and failures that the players have, but no matter how you play the game, essentially it's set up by creating a map of tiles that connect together with various tiles belonging to different character factions. The players build up their team of characters, which are going to have all sorts of different stats and abilities, and then you're going to be spawning them on the map throughout a battle. On your turn, you're going to be activating each of your characters, and this will allow you to perform different movement actions, trade actions, attack actions, or even take advantage of their different abilities, weapons, items, or minions. If you choose to attack another player, combat in this game is resolved by comparing the difference in their strength, and then you're going to be flipping a card to determine the outcome based on the difference. Of course, you can take advantage of your different abilities and items in order to augment your strength. When it's not your turn, you might have different characters or items or gear that will allow you to interfere with the other player's turns. But defeating enemies is not the way that you win this game, but it does help because it does temporarily put their characters out of commission. But the main way that you win this game is by completing different challenges out on the board. Each of these challenges can offer you different bonuses, and it's going to be challenging one of your character's stats. If you're able to complete that skill check, it's going to be gaining you control over the associated faction where you completed that challenge, and you're going to be trying to control as many of these to earn victory points to secure you the win of the game. If you're interested in this and you want to learn more, I will have links to the campaign in the description below. Also on the 24th, we have Salon de Paris, and this plays 1 to 4 players and takes about 60 to 90 minutes to play. And this one is a competitive worker movement game. At the start of this game, all the players are going to start with their workers in the center of the board, but then you're going to be moving your workers to one of the locations around the perimeter of the board to perform the associated action. Anytime you move from one location to another to perform a different action, moving to the adjacent location is always free, but in order to move to any other location, you're going to have to spend tiles in order to make that movement. Whenever you do move to a new location, you're always moving from your current location through the center of the board to your next location. That's important because some of these location tiles will allow you to pick up painting tokens that you've crossed over. Anytime you gain a painting token, you're going to be putting it onto your board, but you do have limited space here, so you do want to do something with your art as quickly as possible. And of course, in order to do that, you do need a canvas. One of these locations does allow you to gain those canvases, and then there is another location that allows you to put your paintings onto that canvas. Anytime you create a completed painting, you're going to be taking a cube off your board, which opens up a space on the side of your board to slot in an ability card. So of course there is also an action that allows you to gain ability cards, but in order to take that one you do have to have an available slot for one. But then there's other actions that allow you to gain apprentices to unlock special bonus actions, upgrade point multipliers for your paintings, or even hang paintings on the Salon board. This is the main way that you're going to be gaining victory points throughout the game, but you'll also be able to gain any bonuses if you're able to put your painting over any of the tokens on this board. But there are a bunch of different placement rules, and you always have to place your painting adjacent to one that is already placed on the board. Then there's also different rules with the types of paintings that you need in your canvas depending on the amount of victory points that you'll be able to score in that position on the board, which is outlined on both sides of the board. There are a few other actions that allow you to gain paintings in a couple of different ways, but if this one does sound interesting to you and you want to learn more, you can find a link to the campaign in the description below. Also launching on the 24th, we have Frayed Ally, and this plays 3 to 8 players and takes about 15 to 30 minutes to play. And this one is a fighting party card game that also incorporates some interesting elements of deduction, because in this game each player is going to be playing as either a villain, a minion, or a rival. The villains and minions win together if they're able to eliminate all the other rival players, but then any of the rivals can win alone by landing the final blow on a villain. Of course, there is also the chance that there are no villains in play, and in that case, it's just a free-for-all where every player is trying to be the last player standing. Players each start with their identity card as well as 2 action cards, and on your turn you're going to be drawing a card into your hand and then choosing one other player to attack for 1 damage. But of course, you can also incorporate your action cards to augment your attack and do additional damage or even have some different effects. Players can also have defensive cards which they can use to defend themselves from these various attacks, but then there are also trap cards that trigger as soon as you draw them from the deck, and these can have all sorts of different negative effects that you're going to have to try and work around if you happen to draw one on your turn. But a really neat aspect of this game is that once a player is reduced to a single point of health, they're going to be revealing their identity to all the other players at the table, which is either going to put a target on their back or change the other player's strategy. But an interesting aspect with this is that when you do have your card revealed on the table, that allows you to perform your secret identity's special ability once and only once every time it is revealed. These can be quite powerful, allowing you different ways to get yourself back into the game, but of course, depending on your role and depending on the other players and depending on who gets eliminated first, that's going to determine who wins the game. And if you are interested in this one, I will have a link to the campaign in the description below. And the next campaign we have is Timelancers, and this one is also launching on the 24th, but this plays 1 to 4 players and takes about 45 to 75 minutes to play. And this one is a competitive game of time travel as players are going to be moving a meeple around on a hex board in order to gain different benefits in order to power their time machine. They're going to be using that to travel to different locations and time in order to change the events that occur. Of course, you're doing all this to complete different objectives to score victory points, but this is a game that I did cover in the past, so if you want to know more details about it, I'll roll that footage for you now. And this one is a competitive tableau builder where players are contracted time travelers hired to rewrite historical events. Players are going to be trying to earn victory points by accomplishing different goals and by capturing events in order to win the game. Players are going to be starting out with some own personal objectives that will allow them to earn victory points throughout the game, but then players will also be moving their characters around on the main board, performing 3 movements on their turn, activating any locations that they are able to land on. These different locations are going to give all sorts of different actions, but mainly they're going to be allowing you to generate different resources. One of the hexes on the board also allows players to jump over to their time machine board, where they'll be able to spend those resources to capture different events, which they will be putting onto the different areas of their time machine depending on what they're trying to achieve. Anytime that you capture an event, you're going to have 2 options. You could either repeat the event in the way that it happened by putting it right side up in one of the slots on your board, or you could revise the event by flipping it upside down and making something completely different happen. With each of these options, there's going to be a different ability that you'll be able to activate with that card. You're going to be putting that card into your tableau in the chronological order of the events that you were able to capture so far. But the interesting thing about revising an event is that anytime that you put a revised event into your tableau, it then causes a butterfly effect to any of the other events of the same type, which means that all the other events of the same type after the card that you just put are going to get rotated 180 degrees, giving you access to the other ability of that card. But this doesn't just happen on your own player board because you actually cause this ripple effect to all the other players. But that butterfly effect isn't only experienced on the individual player boards, because it's also going to be affecting those hexes in the center of the board, because any of those hexes that also match the same type of the card you just played are going to be flipped to their opposite side, revealing a different action for players to take advantage of anytime they move onto that hex. The game continues like this, with players earning victory points for the different objectives and actions that they're able to take. You can win the game in one of two ways. You can either be the first to accumulate a certain amount of victory points, or be the first to capture a certain amount of events. Whichever player is able to do that wins the game, and if you want to learn more, you can check it out. I got links in the description below. Also on the 24th, we have Source and TimeStrike, and this is a game that has a wide variety of player counts, and I think the reason for that is because there's really no limits to how you can play this game, but there is a core rule set that takes about 90 to 120 minutes to play. But these are two different things here, and the first one I want to talk about is Source, which is a modular system to support a bunch of different games, but it also allows for your own game creation. It's going to be offering you a ton of miniatures for terrain, characters, and creatures, and the characters and creatures will also have character boards as well. There's going to be a whole bunch of multi-layer hexes that players can build and combine in different ways to create their maps, and there are provided rules and guides in order to help you create any type of game that you want to create using these components. But of course, TimeStrike is a game built on the system, and this is an arena combat game that allows players to each control their own squad of survivors. Players are going to be going up against each other, as well as a larger boss that's going to be getting stronger and stronger as the game goes on. Players will be able to use actions to forge artifacts, unearth different valuable items, build forts, and unlock new technologies. This game also offers taming and wildlife and mountable creatures, as well as collecting resources in various ways such as mining and fishing. Each character in this game does have their own backstory, and players will be able to explore the time ruins in order to uncover their characters' pasts. A really cool aspect of this game is that that main board is actually going to be built up and destroyed within the course of a single battle. I don't really have too much more info on how this one plays, but if you do want to learn more, I will have a link to their campaign in the description below. Also launching on the 24th, we have Reforest, and this plays 1 to 4 players and takes about 30 to 60 minutes to play. And this one is a competitive tableau builder where players are competing to build up the healthiest ecosystems by creating a unique tableau of plants in order to attract a specific type of wildlife for that round in order to score victory points at the end of the game. On a player's turn, they can perform one of two actions. They can either perform the gather action, which will allow them to draw 2 cards from the main deck or from the open market, or instead they could choose to perform the action to play a plant into their tableau. You do want to be careful when you do this because your tableau does have limited space, and your tableau is broken into low, middle, and high elevation, and only certain cards can be played into the certain elevations. But adding it to your tableau is going to allow you to gain that specific plant's benefits, as well as synergize with any of the other plants you might already have there. Whenever you do this, it will come at the cost of the other cards in your hand, because each card will have a cost to play, and you're going to have to discard some other cards in your hand in order to meet the nutrient requirements of that card. Each card that's added to your tableau is going to be earning you victory points and adding to your overall ecosystem depending on their interconnected abilities. The end of the round is triggered once that main deck is depleted, and then the animal card for that round is going to be going to the player that best met their habitat preferences. This could be depending on the number of flowers, fruit, or other items within your forest. The game continues like this over a series of rounds with a different animal each round with different preferences that players are going to be trying to manipulate their ecosystem in order to try and appease. After all those animals have found a happy home, the end of the game is triggered and the player with the most victory points wins the game. And finally, we're on to the games that are launching on the 25th, and the first one that we have here is called Wondrous Creatures, and this plays 1 to 4 players and takes about 60 to 120 minutes to play. And this one is a competitive worker placement, and the way that this game works is that you're going to have a main board that's broken up into different groups of hexes, with each of those groups having different terrain types and possibly having different resource icons. On a player's turn, they can take 1 of 4 actions. They can either put one of their workers out on the board. For each adjacent resource, they'll be able to take 1 resource or creature card that's matching that type. Players can also place their character onto the egg tokens that will be appearing out on the board, and whenever you pick that up, you can either place it onto your board to move up the track for different benefits, or you can spend it to perform some extra actions. Players also have an action to take their workers back, which will move their character up the time track, which can trigger the end of the game. But as time passes, the board can also change as well. Another action players can perform is to pay the resources required by their cards in order to play one of 2 cards into their tableau. And this is how you build your engine in this game, because each of these are going to be coming with different opportunities or bonuses, and they can do different things like upgrade your workers or grant you those abilities, and you will also be trying to match icons and powers in order to chain those abilities together or to gain other bonuses. But of course, players are doing all of this to gain victory points and hopefully win the game, and the way that you do that is by completing different objectives, whether it's by collecting a certain amount of cards of certain types, or by collecting the various resources, but essentially you're going to be trying to fulfill the requirements of these objectives first, because it is a bit of a race in order to claim those achievements. The game can end in one of 2 ways. Either all of those achievements have been taken, or one of the players reaches the end of the time track. At that point, the player with the most victory points wins the game, and if you are interested to learn more about this one, I will have it linked in the description below. Also launching on the 25th, we have FormulaGP, and this plays 1 to 6 players and takes about 30 to 120 minutes to play. And of course, this one is a competitive racing game where players are going to be part of a racing team, controlling their cars and trying to be the first to get one of their cars across that finish line. An interesting aspect of this game is that players are going to be taking turns moving their cars around the track, but the amount of movement you get depends on a few factors. First, there is the tile that you're starting on, and that's going to determine what gear your car is in. You're going to be combining this with one of your speed cards to determine what your overall movement will be, and then you're also going to be adding a tire bonus depending on the condition of your tires. Something I really like about this is how your position on the board really impacts the amount of movement that you're going to be able to get, so you might want to pull back some of your movements on some turns to get on a tile that will set you up better for the following turn. But then you might be asking, why don't I always just play my most powerful cards anytime I play a turn to get the most movement? And there's a few different reasons for that. They can cause additional tire damage, they can stress your driver, drain your battery, and you also have a limited amount of cards. And you do want to keep some of your better ones when it comes to overtaking the other players. If you're playing with the advanced rules, each of the boards will also have a speed limit, and if you go over that amount, you're going to have to roll the crash die to determine if you spin out of control. But another reason that you're going to watch where you end your movement is because some of these sections of the boards can actually allow for slipstreaming and allowing players behind you to possibly overtake you a little bit easier. So this is just another reason that moving as far as possible on your turn is not always the best strategy, and I really love this aspect of the game because this is a Formula 1 race, and it is not about your track time to move around a single lap. This is a long-term race, and you're going to be trying to maximize your overall performance over the entirety of the race. And this game offers 3 different ways that you can overtake your opponent. You can just use your basic movement to overtake them if you are at least 1 lane away, which means that there's a gap in between you. Or if the opportunity presents itself, you can use that slipstreaming, which I just mentioned. But other than those 2 ways, anytime that you are passing another player, you're going to have to challenge them by choosing one of your speed cards, and then your opponent choosing a speed card, and then simultaneously revealing. This is why it's so important to make sure that you're keeping some of those more powerful cards in your hand, because not only do you want to pass other people, but you also want to defend against other people passing you. With everything I'm seeing for this one, this does look like a game that does a fantastic job of simulating the Formula Racing, and if you're a fan of Formula Racing, or if you think this game just sounds like a lot of fun, you can definitely check it out in the description below, but there are some additional rules associated with wheel-to-wheel driving, and some advanced rules that you can include depending on how you want to play the game. But like I said, this one will be linked down in the description below, and of course you can click to get notified. And if you do follow along before it launches, you'll get a few extra cards added to your pledge. Also launching on the 26th, we have Alpenglow, and this plays 2 to 5 players and takes about 45 to 120 minutes to play. And this one is a competitive game where players are competing to build up a ski resort. That means that you're going to be collecting resources in order to build certain buildings that can gain you different benefits, but then you're also trying to build the different runs for the mountain. Then you're also doing everything that you can to deliver skiers to the hill, and also make sure that you build those chairlifts to help them get to the top. The work that players do on the mountain as well as the work they do in the resort are both going to be providing all sorts of benefits and rewards depending on the action that you take and how well you did it. You're going to be looking for certain synergies in order to maximize your resource generation to allow you to be the one that makes the biggest contribution overall. Unfortunately, I just found out about this campaign launching as I was filming this video, so I haven't had time to look into this one as deeply as I do with a lot of the other games that I cover. So if you do want to know more about this one, I still will have a link to its campaign in the description below, and of course you can check it out to learn more and click to get notified. Also on the 26th, we have a campaign that's going to be offering you 2 different games, with one of those games actually having 2 standalone games in it. So this one is actually 3 different games. But the first one is called My Favorite Things. This plays 3 to 6 players. It takes about 30 minutes to play. And this one is a really interesting trick-taking game because in this game, the players create the cards. The way this works is that each player is going to be giving their neighbor a category, and then they're going to have to write down their top 5 favorite things in that category, as well as their number 1 least favorite thing. The person who asked the question is going to be the one getting those cards, and the value of those cards is determined by how the other player ranked them. Of course, you don't know what this is until you actually play them into the various tricks, but of course, using your intuition and what is written down on the cards, you might have some sense of what they might like more than others. But the cool thing about this is that every time you play a trick, you're going to see how that card performed with the other cards that were in that trick, and that's going to give you some more information as to what the other cards might be. This will hopefully make you a little bit more confident in the cards that you're playing in your following tricks, but you're going to be doing this over a series of rounds, and then the player with the most victory points at the end of those rounds wins the game. And the other game being offered in this campaign is the String Railway Collection, and this plays 2 to 5 players and takes about 20 to 45 minutes to play. And this is actually going to include 2 standalone games. There is the upgraded version of the original String Railway, as well as String Railway Cubes, which was formerly called String Railway Transport. But if you're not familiar with String Railway, this is a game where players are going to be building a railway out of strings. The main board is set up by putting the main string around the perimeter, which is going to have a few different nodes on it, which indicate where players will be putting their starter stations. Players will also throw in a string randomly into the center, which is going to represent a mountain, and another string that's going to represent a river. But each player is also going to have 4 shorter strings and then 1 longer string, and you're going to be using those to build out your individual railways. But on a player's turn, they're going to be placing 1 string, which means, of course, you have 5 turns in this game. But on your turn, you're going to first draw a station, and these stations can have all sorts of different effects, but they can also have different points rewarded to the owner, as well as different points awarded to anyone that connects to that station. There is also a limit of connections that each station is going to have labeled on it, and when you place your string, you're always going to be expanding on your network, and you always do have to end your string connected to a station. The catch with this is that you're going to lose a single point anytime you cross over any of the other strings, although there are some stations that allow you to break this rule and can even reward you for doing this in certain situations. The game continues like this over the course of those 5 rounds, and the player with the most victory points at the end wins the game. String Railway Transport actually plays quite a bit differently than this game, and you're actually going to be starting the game with a predefined setup for the different stations and strings that are going to be out on the table. Rather than deciding where to place your routes and your railways, players are instead going to be controlling their engine to try and move cubes from different stations to other stations in order to gain victory points. Players will be able to upgrade their train engine to make all sorts of improvements so that they can move more cubes or move more cubes further distances. The game continues like this as players try to get the cubes into the right location while also completing various objective cards, and the player with the most victory points at the end of the game wins the game. And if any of these sound interesting to you, you can find a link to the campaign in the description below. And the last campaign I have for you is launching on the 28th. I'm not going to dig too deep into this one because this one is actually a tabletop war game and I don't normally spend as much time on those, but this one is called BLKOUT. But like I said, this one is a tabletop war miniatures game where players are going to be controlling different units, rolling a 10-sided die to issue attacks, and then also incorporating different tactics and strategies to try and win against their opponents in a tabletop skirmish. This one does have a more sci-fi theme, allowing you to fight with different troops with different technologies, as well as fight against straight-up robots. If you are interested in this one, I'll have a link below, and you can follow along to get an extra miniature added to your pledge completely for free. And that is almost everything I have for you in this video, and I hope you still maintained your sanity after spending this much time with me and going through this many games. But as always, we do have a bunch of giveaways to announce, and I'm going to try and get through these as quickly as possible so you can enjoy some of your weekend. But the first one we have is for The Witcher Path of Destiny. And this one is a game where players are going to be playing as different Witcher characters with different abilities and ways to level up, and you're essentially going to be playing through different stories and voting on which path you want to take. Depending on the action cards that you choose, that's going to be determining your votes, and then anytime that you win votes, you're going to be gaining victory points for the end of the game, but then otherwise you'll be earning experience points they can use to level up your character. Players are going to be playing through the entire story, and then the player with the most victory points at the end of the game wins the game. And this giveaway is going to be for one of these pledges, but I'm not sure which one yet because I do need to sort that out with the publisher a bit more. But if you are interested in The Witcher or winning yourself a pretty sweet free game, feel free to leave a comment down below with the hashtag Witcher. And I know I am going through these quickly, but I don't want to undersell how awesome these giveaways are, because our next giveaway is for Ezra and Nehemiah, which is the next game coming from Gartful Games. And if you are a fan of heavy games, this is the heaviest one that they have released so far, but they are more well known for creating games like the South Tigris series, as well as the West Kingdom series. This one will definitely still give you that crunchiness that you'll find in those games, because in this one, players are going to be rebuilding Jerusalem. Players are going to be using both worker placement as well as performing actions based on the cards that they have in their own personal tableau. The cool thing here is that your tableau is limited in the amount of cards that you can put there. You're going to be trying to get certain banners into your tableau because each of your actions will require a certain amount of banners of a particular color. But because you do have a limited space in your tableau, you're going to be changing those throughout the game, changing the options you have as you play through the game. This is a game that provides a wide variety of ways for you to score victory points, and of course those cards are going to be presenting you with some special abilities as well that you can take advantage in addition to the banners that they add towards your actions. And winning this giveaway will get you a pledge for this game as well as the metal coins to give you more of a deluxified experience. And if you want to enter this giveaway, just leave a comment down below with the hashtag Ezra. Hold up, don't leave a comment on my video for this one. Instead, if you want to enter this giveaway, I'm actually going to send you over to another channel, because last week I covered my usual weekly footage like I am right now, but one of those games I didn't have a whole lot of info on, so I ended up using one of the videos from another channel in order to get the information that I could. And when I filmed that, I did give a shout out to that channel, because it's kind of a jerk move to get information from someone else's work and then not reference them as part of your source material. But because I splice up my videos so much and I do so much editing, somehow that little shout out fell out in the editing, so I feel really bad for that, and I hope this little gesture will do that error right, because this one is Drive-Thru Games, who has done a ton of great quality content over the years. And something that I really like about Joel's channel is that he does like a lot of the typical games that you might find in a board gamer's collection, but he also has a good amount of games that I haven't ever heard before, or even games that maybe I've heard of but haven't really heard many people talk about them. So he does have quite a diverse taste, and his tastes don't completely align with what's hot or in the top 100. So I do like to see content creators that are bringing in their own tastes and flavor into the community, and he doesn't shy away from the heavy games either. So I think it is a good choice for this giveaway. But assuming that YouTube sends you to the same video when I go to this playlist, it should be taking you to the number 41 to 50 video. He does have all of these broken out into separate videos, but make sure that you leave a comment on this first one. And then this is where I'll be drawing the winner from for next week. Of course, if you do want to check out more of the games that he likes, feel free to watch more of the videos in the playlist and work your way all the way up to that number 1. Good luck in the giveaway, but there are still more to come, and these are all amazing giveaways. This one is a really cool one because this one's going to allow you to deluxify your train games and even get everything that you need if you want to deluxify Ticket to Ride. This one is called the Deluxe Board Game Train Set, and this is the second campaign that these creators have ran. This one's going to be introducing a bunch of new train engines as well as train cars that will match with the existing engines as well as the new ones in this campaign. So if you want to get a set of trains that you'll be able to connect together and have the train engine in the front and then all the cars, this is definitely one that will allow you to do that. And that just looks really cool out on the table. This is definitely something that I would love to have as part of my Ticket to Ride, because these ones just have way more character and look like a lot more fun to play with out on the board than the ones that come in your typical board game. And the giveaway for this one is really nice because it's going to be for the Robber Baron pledge, which is going to get you a complete set of the Extraordinary Engines, as well as the associated rail cars. And if you are interested in this one, and to enter this one, all you got to do is leave a comment down below with the hashtag train. And whoever wins this next giveaway is going to make me super jealous, because this is a game that I've wanted to add to my collection for a while, but my current budget just doesn't allow for it. But this one is for FlickFleet, a box of flicks. If you're not familiar with this game, this is a really cool game where you're going to be flicking different ships out on the board, but your ships can have different cannons and different abilities that you'll be able to take advantage of throughout the game. But the cool thing about this is that you'll only be able to flick your ships from designated areas of that ship token, usually where the thrusters are located, which means that it matters the position that your ship stops at when you're trying to move it across the board. You can also ram into other players or crash into asteroids, or even just flick yourself right off into space. The cool thing here is that not only are you flicking to get your spaceships into position, but you're also flicking dice in order to shoot your lasers. You're going to be flicking those dice at the other opponents, or flicking components depending on the type of weapons that your ship has. Like I said, ships can also have all sorts of special abilities, and depending on what area of your ship gets damaged, you may not be able to use those abilities until you're able to repair them, assuming your ship does have an engineering department that isn't already destroyed. And this giveaway is going to be for the deluxe multiplayer bundle that's going to get you the core game, as well as the expansion that allows for multiplayer play up to 4 players. And to enter this giveaway, all you got to do is leave a comment down below with the hashtag Flick. And the next giveaway we have is for a pledge for Fall of Lumen. And this is a competitive game where players are trying to gain influence in the city of Lumen. And this is a city that's going to be floating around the board, and players are going to be using different actions and using their deck and actions to gain resources and convert those resources into other resources that they can then use to upgrade their units into different types of units that they can then use to influence the city of Lumen by getting them into positions of power that will also gain you some really nice special abilities. This is a beautiful game as well, and it's always just a little prettier when it does come from Kickstarter. And this one is going to get you a copy of the game and all unlocked stretch goals. And under this giveaway, just leave a comment down below with the hashtag Lumen. And the last giveaway we have is for a roll and write, and this one's called Villagers of the Oak Dell. And this one looks like a really cool roll and write because it has a few interesting mechanisms going for it. First of all, the way that the action selection works in this game is that you're actually going to be using a wheel in order to perform your actions. Players are going to be rolling their dice, and then you're going to be placing those dice out onto a wheel. And then the value and color of the dice are going to dictate which region of the wheel you can put your die on, but then also which actions you're able to take. This is going to grant you with a bunch of different resources that you'll be able to mark off on your player sheet, with each of the areas behaving a little bit differently. And what I like about this roll and write is that it does have a bit of an engine building mechanism as well, because different areas on your sheet will allow you to invest in your future turns, and some of them even allow you to unlock some special actions and abilities that you'll be able to take advantage of. The price on this one is also super affordable, so if this one does sound interesting to you, I do recommend checking out their Kickstarter. But to enter this giveaway, we're going to be doing this one a little bit differently. Instead of leaving a comment down below, I'm going to send you over to our Discord, which you can also find in the description down below. Head over to the giveaways channel and then click the little emoji underneath that giveaway, and that'll get you entered into the giveaway, which will be drawn at the end of next week. Good luck in those giveaways, but now let's go ahead and draw the winners for last week's giveaways, which was for a pledge for Davy Jones' Locker and a pledge for Irune Light and Darkness. And to draw a winner, use this fancy application here. All these extra names down here are bonus entries for my Patreon subscribers. If you do like this sort of content and you want to help support the channel, it really does make a massive difference for me. This takes a lot of effort on my part, and I'm super fortunate to have a supportive community, both in the comments section, but also here on Patreon. And if you're not interested in donating, you can still join the Patreon for free if you just want to stay up to date with some of my posts on there. I don't post too much, but I do post a little bit of additional information of games that I'm interested in or games that I plan to back. And I only just recently found out that there is a free tier on Patreon, so I thought it would be fun to enable that, because the Patreon really is just here for anyone that does want to add support for the channel. I don't really use it for exclusive content other than these bonus entries into the giveaway, which is just a nice perk. But the first giveaway we're going to draw for is for Davy Jones' Locker, so let's go ahead and draw those comments. And I made a mistake somewhere, so where did I make a mistake? Alright, so it looks like the usual comment picker isn't working today. I don't know why, but I've tried a whole bunch of different ways and nothing's working, so it's nothing on my end. It's definitely a bug on their system, so hopefully they have that fixed soon. But for now, I'm going to have to use this other random comment picker, but I couldn't find one that allows me to add additional entries. This usually isn't the case, but we only have 2 giveaways here, so let's just assume that the gods are rolling the dice this time. In a way, all of this happening this way is still very random, so let's just roll with it and pick a winner. So the winner of Davy Jones Locker is... how do I read this? Oh, it's What The. That is the winner of the giveaway. So congratulations, What The, and thanks for the comment. And I'm sorry to hear that you're scared of crabs because they are one of the tastiest foods that I can think of. But I have also played the game Stranded Deep, so I do understand where you're coming from. Just email me at adam@shelfclutter.com and we'll get that pledge all sorted out for you. Now let's go ahead and draw for a rune. So let's go ahead and draw those comments and draw a winner. And the winner is Mistwalker, and he says, thanks as always for the weekly roundup and the giveaways. A lot of variety this week, so there's something for everyone. I'm on a dungeon crawler kick this week, so trying to financially justify backing a rune. Well, I'm glad to be able to help you with that decision because you just won yourself a pledge, so just email me at adam@shelfclutter.com. I just want to thank everyone for tuning in and getting involved in these comments. Even if you didn't win, it still does help out the channel a lot. Any interaction really makes a big difference in the whole world of YouTube. I know it sounds cheesy, but this channel definitely wouldn't be what it is today without all of you. I'm definitely seeing more giveaways coming in through different publishers with the extra attention that this channel has been getting with the growing subscriber count and just an awesome active community. Super long episode today and I was hungry like 4 hours ago, so I'm gonna go and grab something to eat. But until next time, thanks so much for watching, and as always, keep that shelf cluttered and the table full.
Oh.